Welcome. We're in week 10. Week 10 of Explore the Bible. We're continuing through the book of Daniel. This week we're in Daniel chapter 4. And I think it's a passage that maybe we kind of skip because we like the stories about Daniel in the lion's den, and we like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown in the fire. But sometimes we skip over chapter 4. And this is a great story. As we talked at the end of last week about how God is clearly going after Nebuchadnezzar and trying to reach Nebuchadnezzar. Boy, now it heats up big time. So before we dive into chapter 4, be sure and subscribe to our channel, like the videos, share them with other people, comment on them, let us know how God's working. All right, let's look at chapter 4. At the end of 12 months, as he was walking on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon, the king exclaimed, "Is this not Babylon the Great that I have built to be a royal residence by my vast power and for my majestic glory?" Woo! Well, somebody's feeling good about themselves, aren't they? You hear this prideful statement that comes out of him, and we see these, the I have built it, it's my power and my glory. I mean, the king's walking around and he's just looking at the city and, well, man, isn't this great? Look what I have done. Look how great I am. Man, all of this just shows what a great king I am. As people live in our city and live in our kingdom, they just know that I have great glory. I deserve the glory. I deserve all the credit. I deserve all the praise because look at what I have done with my power. With the Lord I guess you could say the Lord has grown tired of Nebuchadnezzar. He's been worn out by Nebuchadnezzar, and it is time to drop the bomb on him. And so here it comes. While the words were still in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven. Now I want to tell you something here. We need to realize that all of this comes from Nebuchadnezzar, right? There's nobody else up there. This is all the story from Nebuchadnezzar. We know he retells this. We'll see that even later. While the words were still in his mouth, a voice came from heaven. "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared that the kingdom has departed from you. You will be driven away from people to live with the wild animals, and you will feed on grass like cattle for 7 periods of time, that's 7 years, until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms, and he gives them to anyone he wants." Woo! As the words have not even reached a foot away from him, right? They're still in his mouth. He's still speaking these things when he hears from the Lord. And the Lord says, you are about to lose your kingdom. In fact, he says it has departed. It is gone. You have lost your kingdom. It has left you, right? You're going to be driven away. You're going to not only lose your kingdom, you're losing your home. You're losing your sanity. You're losing your mind. Literally, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to go out and live with wild animals. You're not even going to live with people anymore. You're just going to live out with the wild animals. You're going to eat grass like cattle. You're just going to eat the grass right off the ground, right? Until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms, and he gives them none of this, I built this and this is my power and my glory. He says you're going to recognize that it is the Lord, the Most High God, Yahweh, the King of the universe, the creator of all things. You're going to bow down and recognize that he is the one who's done this. And until you do that, you're going to live like an animal. And sure enough, that's what happens. I mean, that moment he is gone and he is living out in the wilderness, living like an animal. At that moment, the message against Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with dew from the sky until his hair grew like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claw. You can imagine what he looked like living 7 years like an animal. I mean, his hair's grown out, his fingernails have grown out, his toenails, he looks like an animal, right? There's no human resemblance at all. He's not wearing clothes, he's not doing anything. He's not bathing, he's just like an animal. The Lord, he's lost his mind. He's gone crazy. And I'm sure that's what people said about him. He's just gone crazy. The king just lost his mind and went out, gave up his royal robes, gave up his household, gave up his power, gave up his his influence, gave up all of his wealth, his riches. He gave it all up, and he's living like an animal. And I'm sure there were times when people would see him and tell stories about him for 7 years. Think about that. For 7 years. He's just living out there like that. And you imagine all the stories and all the things that people say about him, right? And until he will acknowledge God, the Lord says, I'm done with you. Until you acknowledge me. Let me just say, don't wait. Don't wait to that point. Don't push the Lord. Don't test his patience. All right? Don't test his patience. Now we get to this personal testimony from Nebuchadnezzar. He's come back. He says, but at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven, and my sanity returned to me. He looked up. You know, he'd spent his time looking down, right? Standing on the roof, looking down at everything. And now, finally, he looks up to the Lord, and his sanity returns. Then I praised the Most High, and honored and glorified him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation, and all the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wants with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. There is no one who can block his hand or say to him, what have you done? Nebuchadnezzar's come to his senses in more ways than one, right? We might say clearly he regained his sanity, but he finally came to his senses about who he was and who God is. You know, I think it was Dawson McAllister. He used to say, there is a God and he is not you. You know, Nebuchadnezzar finally figured this out. There is a God and it ain't me. I thought it was. There was a point where I thought I was God. He said, but I am not. He said, there is a God, and he has a dominion that is an everlasting dominion. That is, he is always the ruler of the earth. He is always the king of all the kings, the Lord of all the lords. He's always the ultimate creator, the all-powerful God. That's who he always is. And his kingdom goes from generation to generation, one after the other. We're all serving as his kingdom, and we are nothing, right? We can't do anything. He can do anything he wants to the army or the heaven or the inhabitants of the earth. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar is evidence of this. Look, I was standing on the roof of the palace, and the next day I am eating from the grass right off the dirt. Right? There's no one that can block his hand or tell him, what have you done? There's nobody that can do that. We don't have any place here. God is God and we are not. And at that time, he says, Nebuchadnezzar continuing, my sanity returned to me, and my majesty and splendor returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and my nobles sought me out. I was reestablished over my kingdom, and even more greatness came to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and glorify the King of the heavens, because all his works are true and his ways are just. He is able to humble those who walk in pride. Boy, he knows this, right? Nebuchadnezzar knows that better than anybody, maybe in all of history. God will humble you. And he got everything back. He was restored back. And I don't know how that worked within the kingdom and what did they do for 7 years, but he came back and he went back into, they invited him back into the palace, and they restored his kingdom, and he says it was better than it was before. Even more greatness came to me. It was even better than it was before. But it says, but I now give glory to the King of heavens, because his works are true and his ways are just. He is a different man now. That is not to say that he's a perfect man. We're going to see that in a minute, right? It's not to say that he's immune to the temptations of the office. Certainly, we're going to see that in a minute. Those are still there. But he understands his place differently now, and he understands who he is and who he is not. And boy, that's important, isn't it? That is the heart of humility, isn't it? Heart of humility is knowing who I am and who I am not. Rightly understanding my place in the world and my place before God. And he believed that he did not answer to anyone, and he now knows I answer to God. I answer to him. He can humble anyone who walks in pride. We don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to be humbled by God. I'd rather just try to figure out humility on my own, right? I certainly don't want the Lord to humble me. But He will if He needs to, and I guess if He needs to, God, please do it. But I don't want to have to go through that. I want to learn to live rightly today and understand rightly who I am and who He is and what my place is. Well, I hope that's helped as you prepare, as you study, as you teach. God bless you. Thank you so much for doing that. I really do appreciate all of you who teach in churches all over the world. And be sure and subscribe to our channel. Like, comment, share it with others, right? We'll see you next week. Going to get fun next week with Daniel. All right.